Pythagoras' theorem, finding the hypotenuse. So we should remember from last year that the hypotenuse of a right-angled triangle is the longest side. And we can find the hypotenuse by going to the right angle, and it's not one of the sides that's touching the right angle. So this one touches the right angle and this one makes the right angle. Over here, this side isn't touching the right angle. This is the hypotenuse. Here, this one is the hypotenuse. Now the hypotenuse in Pythagoras' theorem gets labelled C. The other two short sides get labelled A and B, and it doesn't matter which one's A and which one's B. Sometimes other letters might get used, but when we write Pythagoras' theorem, it's got an A, a B, and a C. The A and the B are the short sides, and the C is the hypotenuse, opposite the right angle. And Pythagoras' theorem only works for right-angled triangles. Now there's two ways to write Pythagoras' theorem. The way that will always work is c squared equals a squared plus b squared. That's the most important one, because it will work for any type of Pythagoras' question ever. If you want an easy formula that will let you go straight into your calculator, we can use c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. It's the same formula, this one's just rearranged. But we might only give this formula in the test, I'll have to check, so we do need to learn to use this one as well. Our steps when I'm asked to find the length of the hypotenuse. Step 1. If there's a formula, we always write the formula. We substitute in the values we know. And we solve it, and don't forget the square root. And we write the units. Now we might need a bit of practice to remember the steps of Pythagoras' theorem, and I'm going to do one example with each formula. Find the length of the hypotenuse to 1 decimal place. I'm going to start with the proper Pythagoras formula. C squared equals a squared plus b squared. You can see that I'm finding the hypotenuse. It's the one that's got no number on it, and it's opposite the right angle. The other two are the short sides. It doesn't matter if they're A or B, we can just decide that's A and that's B. Substitute the values we know. We don't know C. A is 2, so that will be 2 squared. We don't write the centimetres or metres in. Plus B is 5. We'll write 5 squared. So C squared equals. Now at that point we can type 2 squared plus 5 squared into our calculator. 2 squared plus 5 squared equals 29. Now that isn't the answer. That's the answer for C squared. But I want C. Once I've got to the end where I've got C squared and I've just got a number, I want C equals, and I need the square root of that number. Square root of 29. Then last step of working, get the square root of 29. It's up above the squared button, so second function square root 29 equals, Now, often your calculator will just leave it like that. Push the button. That gives you a decimal answer. It wants this to one decimal place, 5.385. Look where I'm cutting it off after 1. Check the first number, 5 or more, so I'll add 1. 5.4. And remember in the steps, write the units. This was centimetres, so this must be centimetres. It's not centimetres squared, I've just found the length of that side. And because the hypotenuse is the longest side, it should be longer than the others. 5, 2, and 5.4. It's longer. So that's perfect working for Pythagoras. Write the formula, substitute the values, get the c squared answer, then get down to c and the square root, and c equals 5.4 with the answer. We'll use this formula for this one. Find the length of the hypotenuse. They haven't labelled it, so I'll label it c. And I can call these A or B, it doesn't matter which is which, but I know that's the hypotenuse because it's opposite the right angle. Steps, always write the formula. C equals the square root of A squared plus B squared. Substitute your values. I don't know C, but I know A is 7, so that will be 7 squared, plus B is 3, so it will be 3 squared. Now at that point, you can type the whole thing into your calculator. C equals, but we've got to get it right. Second function and square root, 7 squared plus 3 squared. You'll see it has to stay underneath the square root sign. Older calculators might not do that, and if it doesn't put it all under the square root sign, you might need to put brackets around that to make sure that it gets the square root of the whole thing. Push enter, square root of 58, so double arrow to get a decimal answer. And I want one decimal place, 7.615. Rounding off after the 6, the first thing I'm cutting off is a 1, so I leave it. 7.6, check the steps, write the units. That's in meters. Now, you'll see that this formula has the square root built in. It doesn't start with c squared. The square root is built in, so I don't get to a point where I need to remember, oh, I've got to use the square root. So this one's easier when I'm finding the hypotenuse, but I've got to remember it. Whereas this one is always going to work, but I do have to remember when I get to c squared, for an answer, I've still got to get c and the square root. So either one's a bit tricky. It's up to you which one you find easiest.